Hey, alt history, Peter. Have you ever wondered how US history would have differed if the US never backed Israel?
A stack for Rula, Stewie. Here's an in-depth analysis about how U.S. history would have changed if we never backed Israel. First, let's set the stage. After World War II, many Jewish people raised interest in the Zionist movement, which was a movement that called for Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and start a Jewish state in Israel. The movement gained enough traction that there were talks about a Jewish state in Israel. President Truman, being an evangelical Christian, backed this movement, which got Israel UN support along with the personal backing from a global powerhouse. This was the start of a 75-year lasting bond between the US and Israel.
That's cool. But what the deuce would have happened differently if the US never backed them?
Well, starting at the beginning, the Jewish people of Israel would most likely have still attempted to make a Jewish state in Israel, but they would have had a lot more trouble getting traction and power in the region without U.S. backing. Israel would have faced a lot of early struggles involving the surrounding nations without the U.S. or UN support.
Oh, so there's a possibility that Israel wouldn't have even gotten on the map in the first place.
Not just that, Stewie. The native Palestinians most likely would have had a much bigger voice and pushback against the Zionists creating a full-blown Jewish state in Israel without the UN's help.
What about all of the wars in the Middle East? Would they have changed?
Yes, Dan, many major wars, such as the Suez Crisis and the 60-Day War, would have been completely different or never even have happened at all without Israel, backed by the U.S.
What were these conflicts about?
Good question, Joe. The Suez Crisis was a war involving Egypt, the U.S., and the U.K. Egypt had multiple international trade companies on the Suez Canal. They were owned by the UK, but almost completely run and operated by the Egyptians. So Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt at the time, nationalized or took control of these international trade companies under the control of the Egyptian government. The operation was to regain control of the Suez Canal, and was a joint effort between the UK and Israel, with weapons being supplied by the US because of their joint alliance with Israel. Without Israel being a major player or even existing on the map, the UK would have most likely had to take the canal back with minimal help and small resources from the US.
That's cool, Donald, but as a pure-blooded American dad, I have to ask, how would the U.S. not becoming allies with Israel directly affect the United States?
That's a great question, Jake. Here's a couple of possibilities. The first major event that wouldn't happen directly because of the alliance with Israel would be the oil shock, which involved the OPEC countries banning all oil trade with the U.S., which sent shockwaves through the economy and caused a shearing halt to the U.S.'s growth. This was due to the Six-Day War, which was a conflict involving the U.S. backed Israel and the previously mentioned OPEC countries. Without the U.S. backing Israel, or Israel possibly even being on the map, the oil shock would have never happened, and the Six-Day War most likely wouldn't have even happened either without the U.S. backing Israel.
Well, that sounds great. What else would have happened?
I'm so glad you asked, Drake. One of the biggest events that wouldn't have happened if the U.S. never backed Israel is many various Middle Eastern wars. Israel, with U.S. support, had many struggles involving the native Palestinians and external conflicts such as the surrounding countries like Egypt, Iraq, Iran, and Jordan, wanting Israel's land for political and religious reasons. Wars such as the Arab-Israeli War, the 60-Day War, the Six-Day War, the Suez Crisis, and multiple Gaza wars would have never happened had Israel not been a big player through the U.S. Not just that, but many of these conflicts that were started through the U.S.-backed Israel would have caused many conflicts directly involving the U.S. as well. Many internal political conflicts in Iraq, Iran, Jordan, and Egypt happened due to mistrust of the United States. Some of the bigger events and wars that happened based on the mistrust and hatred for the U.S. government include the Gulf Wars and the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan.
Wow, it seems like it was a sort of domino effect.
Indeed, it was Drake, but by far the biggest event that most likely would not have happened if the U.S. never backed Israel would have been 9/11.
Whoa, how so?
But you asked, Stan, you see, the reason the terrorist organization known as Al-Qaeda attacked the World Trade Center was due to the U.S. involvement in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which was a part of the U.S.'s alliance with Israel. It's believed that the 9/11 attacks and the subsequent war on terror most likely would not have even happened, or would have been largely different had an alliance with Israel.
Wow, it seems like we should have never made an alliance with Israel in the first place.
Maybe that is true. But the alliance with Israel was not all bad. The biggest change in the U.S. that came from the partnership with Israel was the advancements in technology around the U.S.'s military-industrial complex. For better or for worse, the U.S.'s partnership with Israel has created massive advancements in the U.S.'s industrial complex, which has boosted the economy massively and helped millions get jobs between the two countries. Another important negative change that would have been raised if the U.S. never backed Israel would have been the U.S. influence in the Middle East and Southeast Europe. During the Cold War, the U.S. used Israel's placement on the map to help combat rising Russian influence in the Middle East and to gain their own influence in that region. Without a strong ally leading out of World War II, the U.S. would have had a lot harder of a time gaining influence in the Middle East and fighting the subsequent spread of communism and USSR influence. This could have massively changed the outcome of the Cold War and U.S. history as a whole.
So what the deuce should we believe?
That, my friend, is up to you, the reader. But all in all, the U.S.'s partnership with Israel has led to a turbulent but constructive alliance through the past 75 years. Although many tragic events and bloody wars might not have happened, the world as we know it would have been massively different. That, my friends, is my theories on what would have happened if the U.S. never made a partnership with Israel.
My sources I would like to give credit is Parrot AI for these wonderful voices, Subway Surfers for the gameplay in the background, which was recorded with no copyright, Family Guy Wiki for some of the photos used in the beginning of the video. I would like to thank the following sources for the research portion of this project: U.S. Department of State, Office of the Historian, National Archives Milestone Documents, BBC News, Al Jazeera, the New York Times Archives, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, Brookings Institution Foreign Policy Section, Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, History.com, A&E Networks, and Encyclopedia Britannica. Thank you for listening to our video, my fellow Americans, and have a great day.